Book 2 is The Claw of the Conciliator, in which Gene Wolfe blows our minds twice. I'm Dave Butler. Welcome to High Low Brow, because culture matters, and I also like to have fun. You may or may not have already read this, depending on whether you're taking my advice. Maybe you're listening to me up front, in which case, you already know that I'm going to give you spoilers. Today I'm going to talk about Book 2 of Book of the New Sun, Claw of the Claw. It's not Claw, it's the Claw. The Claw of the Conciliator. And going to talk, I think, a little bit more about, this time, about some of the kind of symbolism, some of the ongoing symbolism in the books, as well as talking through the plot. And really, in Book 2, we start to see what an astonishing book the Book of the New Sun is, and how on some level it's impossible to know really what is happening in the story, and you read it because it's a puzzle, because you enjoy it, because it challenges you, because there are multiple readings to what's really going on in the story. Now, you will recall, or from reading, that we ended Book 1 on something of a cliffhanger. So Severian, with the theatrical troupe consisting of Dr. Talos, Baldanders, and Jolenta, who had been a cafe waitress, who Dr. Talos had done something to medically, surgically, cosmetically, to make her into a real bombshell for the sake of the theater. So the theatrical troupe is one set of companions, but also Dorcas, whom Severian, with the Claw of the Conciliator, raised from the dead. And then at the last minute, right before the gate, they run into Hathor and Jonas. They get into the gate, leaving the wall of Nessus, and there's a riot. Right? Riot breaks out. That's literally where Book 1 ends. That's not where Book 2 starts. Book 2 starts, and suddenly Severian and Jonas are staying in an inn and the others are gone. We never, strictly speaking, get an account of what's happened in the meantime, but what seems to have happened is, in the riot, they get separated. They will all meet up again in the course of the book. And so Severian and Jonas, maybe a couple of weeks later, are together without the others at an inn. And we start with a miracle. And this is interesting, right? Because we had miracles. We had at least... We had at least 2 resurrections in Book 1, right? Because our meeting of Dorcas is that Severian, without choosing to, resurrects her, apparently by the power of the Claw of the Conciliator, which he did not know he possessed. Then he himself is resurrected, apparently by the power of the Claw of the Conciliator. By the way, we didn't talk about this at all last time, but we should be beginning to ask questions about, what about the beginning of the book, where Severian himself seemingly drowned and then was hurled back up on the shore? And was that a death and resurrection? What about the dog, right? The dog in one of the very early chapters of Book 1, did the Shadow of the Torturer, right? He rescues a dog that's lost a leg, and he never says that the dog was dead. But do we have a miraculous healing there too? So Book 2 opens with a miracle, which is, and Severian doesn't really seem to note it. He just says he and Jonas are in the inn, and to his surprise, the ewer, the jug that the inn has given him to hold water in, is actually full of wine, and it's good wine. Because later on, there's a comment, he's having wine on a later occasion, and he regrets it's not as good as the wine that is back in the inn in this small town, right? So miracles continue to happen around Severian. And let me rewind and make raise a little bit of a question about symbolism. We're going to see other kinds of biblical and or Christian, specifically maybe Catholic symbolism as we go forward in the series. Recall that that Gene Wolfe is a Catholic. So there is, we're going to see more later in this book. Some of the ongoing symbolism relates to Eden. And I think now is an interesting time to take a moment and say, what about the beginning of the book and Severian being cast out, right? Is this in some sense Severian being cast out of Eden? Should we understand him as Adam? We're gonna see some Adam symbolism later in this book, and I think also in subsequent books, right? So was he, when he's with the guild of the torturers, is he living in a, like all children should, like in ordinary circumstances, all children live in a kind of an Eden, right, before they're sort of cast out. But let me raise kind of indication of how Wolfe approaches this stuff, right? You might say, oh yeah, sure. Like anybody who starts the hero's journey is cast out of his home, right? He is cast out. He does not choose to leave. He is like Adam in the sense that he is thrown out. But there's another sense in which he is maybe like Cain. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that. Adam and Eve are given two commandments with respect to the Garden of Eden. They're told, I think the King James says, to dress and keep it. So to dress in Hebrew is avad, which means to work. It also means, by the way, to perform liturgy. So avodah, work, is a word for the liturgy that the priests perform in the temple. Okay, so Adam is told to work the garden, perform the liturgy. He is also told to shamar, to keep it, okay, which is also the word for keeping the covenant. He's told to do the liturgy and keep the covenant. Adam, and this is not my observation, commentators observe this, Adam seems to be given instructions as if he is a priest in a temple, okay, in Eden. By the way, we get those same words used with respect to Cain in Genesis 4, where Cain is said to be someone who works, avad, the land, right? So Abel is a shepherd. Cain tills the earth. He works, avad, the land. Once he's murdered Abel and God comes after him, he says, am I my brother's keeper? Am I the shomer of my brother? So Cain, interestingly, seems to be again, there's this language that is priestly about him. He is the priest who seems to do the liturgy but not keep the covenant, and therefore he's thrown out, right? These are, again, this is not expressed. Nowhere does Genesis say that Cain is a priest, but this is the implication of the vocabulary that is used in the story, right? So interestingly, what do we have in book one? We see quite expressly Severian doing the work, doing the liturgy, right? He participates in the torture, but also when we see him made up to journeyman, there is literally a liturgy that we watch him go through, right? Where there's a reenactment of the torturing of Saint Catherine, and he's involved because he's the only journeyman who's made up. So he's in the role of the founder of the order, right? And the wheel breaks apart, and Catherine has to be beheaded, and she gives Severian consent, and he beheads her, right? So he does the liturgy. Does he keep the covenant? Well, he breaks the rules. He slips Thecla a knife, and she kills herself, and at least that's what we believe. In the early chapters of Shadow of the Torturer. So, and for this, he is cast out. So, like, on the one hand, is there sort of an echo of Adam? Yes. On the other hand, is he Cain? And this is kind of, we're going to see this. Wolfe plays with the symbolism of the Bible and with symbols like the Eucharist, right? To give not simple, straightforward, obvious meaning, but sort of complex meanings and questions. By the way, there's like a third possible Eden symbolism in the beginning of Severian's story. Because, of course, what Genesis says at the end of Genesis 3 is Adam and Eve have sinned, so they are thrown out of the garden, and cherubim and a flaming sword are placed at the entrance to the garden so they can't come back, right? Cherubim and a flaming sword. So Severian is cast out, and he takes a sword with him. And so there's also this sort of echo that says Severian is, he's not Adam and he's not Cain. He is the angel who has been cast out into the world, right? And if so, what kind of angel is he who goes with the sword? Is some sort of angel of death, right? Some sort of angel of destruction, which is going to be relevant to how the sort of the overall arc of the series, right? So he sort of becomes the angel of the great flood and the rebirth of the world. You're choosing to watch this, you risk spoilers. So, all right. So we return to the action. We've skipped ahead maybe a week or two. Severian and Jonas are staying together. We learn incidentally that Jonas has a metal hand. And later, we learned that actually he also has other metal parts. That his face, or at least part of his face, is, and one of his arms are flesh and bone and human, but that part of his body is apparently most of his body is something else. It's made of metal. By the way, we also have, and it never says anywhere in the book, but we have various indications that Dr. Talos also might be an artificial human. Like what? Well, his skin is said to be unnaturally dry and warm. Also, he never sleeps. When we met him for the first time in book 1, the innkeeper on Severian's first night out of the cloister was dissatisfied that Talos and Baldanders hadn't paid their bill, and he said, "You can sleep with them." Severian goes in the room, and Baldanders is asleep, but Talos is not there. Talos is out wandering around doing something else. He does not sleep. So I don't think we ever get an exact resolution, but Dr. Talos might be an artificial human again. This is a science fiction story. So they're in a village, Jonas and Severian. They are continuing, or Severian is continuing what the sort of practice he has adopted, which is he's realized he can make money as a torturer / executioner, and he's been hired to execute 2 local criminals. One of them is Baldock. We don't see this execution. Baldock is a supporter of Vodulus. Remember, Vodulus, the beginning of the story, was chapter 2, but chronologically the beginning, because things happen out of time sequence here, is Severian meeting Vodulus in a graveyard where they're digging a body up, and Vodulus is a rebel against the regime, and Severian in his heart instantly pledges fealty to him. Well, one of Vodulus's men, Baldock, has been cornered by the populace and has to be executed. I believe that happens. We don't see it on screen. The other is a woman named Morwenna, who is supposedly murdered her lover. I think his name is Stachys, and he has, the night before, he's participated in the interrogation, and this next day he's supposed to execute her. Now, before the execution, Severian is he sees Agia, the woman who with her brother betrayed him in the first book, or he believes he does. And while he's trying to follow her, he encounters there's a fair. So that the local mayor is very entrepreneurial. He's making a big deal out of these executions. He's announced far and wide, we're going to have executions. It's a spectacle, and they set up a fair. So you got a carnival going on to celebrate the executions. And there's this tent where a green man is being exhibited. And Severian goes in and meets the green man. And the green man is human, but he's green. Severian mistakes him for a plant at first, for some of his comments. And the Green Man explains, he says, I'm from the future. Now, by the way, is he from the future or is he from a possible future, depending on how things play out? We don't know. But the Earth is dying, and there is now this interesting suggestion but there are some possibilities for survival. Well, why is this guy green? He's not a plant. Instead, he refers to it as pond scum. He says, we've re-engineered pond scum and filled ourselves with it so that we can get nourishment from the light. So there's some kind of plankton or something that's been genetically engineered, bioengineered into this future human so that he photosynthesizes. And here he's just on display as like a bearded woman or a dog-faced boy, right? In this carnival as a freak show exhibit. They talk briefly. Severian wants to help him, so he breaks his whetstone in half and gives the guy half of his whetstone. I think the implication being that it's like a file. He'll file down the links of his chain and escape. So then we have the execution. The executed woman is named Morwenna. She insists that she is innocent. Severian sort of disclaims that it matters, disclaims that he has anything to do with innocence or guilt. He's just here to perform the role of being executioner, right? Now, I said this before last time. Severian is not held up to us as a moral paragon. He doesn't always do the right thing. We're going to see maybe he does pretty awful things in this book, actually. And maybe this is an example where we would be disappointed in the morality of this exiled angel or this Cain or Adam who is walking the earth among us. So somebody who seems to be a woman who seems to be a friend of Morwenna, the woman to be executed, comes forward with funeral roses. They're said to be threnodic, which is a great example of all the way through. Wolfe is using sort of astonishing words that you have to look up. A threnody is a funeral dirge. These are threnodic funereal roses, and Morwenna smells them, and then the friend is in the audience watching. The execution goes fine. Severian chops off Morwenna's head, and then Eusebia immediately starts gloating and saying, "Ha ha ha! She was in fact innocent. I killed Stachys. He was my man. She stole him from me. That couldn't be allowed to happen. I killed him, and I got her blamed for it, and now she's dead too. I killed her. Ha 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 ha." Right? So again, Severian is arguably complicit in this, right? Then Eusebia takes a deep breath from the roses and keels over and dies. Because apparently Morwenna, when Eusebia handed her the roses to enjoy, Morwenna apparently had a little inhalable poison with her, convenient, and doused the roses in poison and then gave them back, getting her revenge from beyond the grave. So that's our opening episode in the story. Morally complex, unsurprising. We're interacting with time travel right away. We have these. Hey, Severian is doing unwitting miracles, right? Who is this guy? What's going on? Back at the inn, he gets a note from Thecla. Thecla is, of course, the woman to whom he slipped a dagger in her cell after she was finally electrocuted. And then he saw her. He didn't actually watch her kill herself. He just saw blood leak out under the door, and he looked through the window and saw her lying with blood all over her throat. Right. That's what he told us earlier. Well, suddenly he has a note from Thecla. And it says, I was not executed. I was rescued. You played an unwitting part in that. What happened was the electrocution was faked. My slitting my own throat was faked. I was then released, and I am free. Come meet me. And gives him directions. Go up the nearby stream. It flows out of a mine. Come into the mine. Come be with me, my love. Right? Severian, who falls for women hard, runs out, steals a mount, a Destrier. not at all clear it's a horse. In fact, I think there are references to it having horns, so I think it's not a horse. In the courtyard of the inn and rides up. By the way, it turns out later we're going to meet Vodalus. Turns out, coincidentally, Severian has stolen Vodalus's mount. Rides out up the stream, finds the mine, goes inside. He's climbing up and he hears some sound in the forest below him, but pays it no heed. Goes inside and has an encounter. He sees these luminous mists. So he follows the stream for a while. He's in a big chamber, knee deep in water, and he sees these luminescent mists appear, and then they coalesce into these grotesque apes who he looks into their eyes, and notwithstanding that they are big misshapen apes, his perception is that they're human. And he sort of wonders where they come from, and there's this suggestion that maybe they are from the future. There is the suggestion that maybe they come from some city buried beneath the earth. There's the suggestion that Severian of the future, who is writing this down, knows where they come from, but he's not letting that knowledge intrude in the narrative. Severian fights them. He chops off one of their hands, and then subdues them by raising the claw of the conciliator. They all go down, like as if in fealty or out of fear or something, and he flees. Now he gets to the mouth of the cave again, and he's attacked by arbalestiers. Now, an arbalest is a crossbow, but the bolts these things fire seem to be flaming. So, again, this is science fantasy, futuristic stuff, kind of looking medieval. So, his Fooligan cloak ultimately saves him. Remember, Fooligan is the cover that is blacker than black. That even in broad daylight, you can't see the folds of the cloak. It just looks like pure black. And so in the cloak, the arbalestiers can't really see him. He gets down the wall, chases the arbalestiers. I think he kills one of them, and the other one runs away. And they're there with Agia. So he did in fact see her, and she wants to kill him, wants her revenge, but her hired mercenaries have failed her. He is saved from the arbalestiers because one of the apes comes out and seems to be on his side, and he and the ape chase these men away. I think they kill one and chase the other one away. And then it turns out to be the ape whose hand he has cut off, and the ape seems to ask him to heal his hand. The ape seems to know he has the miraculous power to heal. But of course, Severian's not in control of these powers. Water turns to wine around him. People resurrect around him. He's not choosing to do these things, right? So he doesn't seem to be conscious that the ape is making this request. And then he lets Agia go. Jonas, who he fled the inn, leaving. He didn't flee, run away. He raced out of the inn to respond to apparently Thekla's note. Of course, now we see that Agia faked Thekla's note when she was touring Severian around the botanical gardens. Severian told her the story of Thekla. She used that to write this note. Jonas finally catches up. And they go back to the inn, where Severian and Jonas are kidnapped by Vodalus and his men. And we get to one of the central sequences of this book, and I think the first great mind-blowing moment in the Book of the New Sun. There are more than one. I think there's probably two in this book. This is the bigger one. This is the first one. So they Vodalus' men kidnap Severian and Jonas. They go to a fortress, and Vodalus is there with Thea, who was with him in the graveyard way back in chapter 1, right? And who is the sister of Thekla. Severian tells Thea about Thekla's death. Thea then warns Severian that dinner is going to be the the Alzabo analeptic. Now, what is this? Well, an Alzabo is something like a wolf, but it's not from Earth. It's like an alien space wolf, and there is an organ in its brain, and they eat carrion. They eat dead, and the Alzabo, when it eats the dead, acquires the memories and is to some extent the personality, and later we're going to see even a bit the voice of the dead. Okay. Well, you can take this organ out of its brain and make a concoction of it. We're going to see it's a drink. It's a two-part drink that gets mixed together. And then a human can drink that drink and eat the flesh of some dead human. Presumably it might work with other creatures too, but I think in the series we're only going to see humans, and gain all the memories of that dead person. And so Thea warns Severian that is what Vodalus is inviting you to dinner. That is what the dinner is going to be. So Severian and Jonas kind of discuss escape, but they're being watched too closely. It turns out they can't. They then go to this sacral Alzabo feast, and it is played like a sacrament. So there's a servitor of Vodalus. So it is a guy in a kind of a uniform, and he has a little chalice, and he has the Alzabo in two bottles, and he mixes them together in the chalice, and it's shared chalice. People drink out of the chalice, and then and the servitor wipes it with this little cloth. This is the Eucharist, right? And after they drink, then Thecla is paraded out on a sedan, right? They carry her out, and she looks like Thecla, but she's perfectly still because she's dead. And then they converge on her and slice her into dinner, into cuts of meat, like and they converge on her. The others, not Severian, and then when they back off, he just sees piles of a tray of smoking meat, and he eats it, right? And the result is he, from this point on, has all the memories of Thecla. And in fact, from this point on, sometimes it's clear that we're having memories of Thecla because we know Severian's childhood, right? It is in the Torturers Guild. So when he remembers something of a childhood and it's not that, he's remembering things that Thecla knew. Or if he has memories from inside the House Absolute, where Thecla was one of the Otarch's concubines, those are not Severian's memories. They're memories of Thecla. Okay. Now, this is the first moment in this book where you have to stop and say, wait a minute, do I need to go back to the beginning and reread the whole thing from page 1 again? And you can do that, or just like plan on finishing the book, setting it down, coming back and reading it again in 6 months. Why? Because the Severian who is telling you the story is the future Severian. Which means all along, the Severian who's been telling you the story has had all the memories of Thecla. And by the way, now we don't know, might he also possess the memories of other people? Are we get told these weird comments about his perfect memory. We get told he's insane. We get told he's the Autarch now, and this is the story of his coming to the throne. And now we get told his memory is a compound memory. It's the memory of at least 2 and maybe more people. And so we have to go back and think about, are any of the things he said up to now really statements driven by the memories and the personality of Thecla within him, right? So the Severian who gets to the end of this story, whatever you think actually happens in the story is not the Severian who starts. Now, by the way, let me step out of the book for a minute and just make kind of a meta comment. I love that Wolf is doing. This is some of the reason why I chose to talk about this book on the podcast. Okay. I think the truest poetry, the truest storytelling art is when the artist is working in his or her own believed mythology, your own sacred stories. That is how you know the writer is telling something that is true and that matters. There are a lot of books that are a sort of a fraud version where somebody tells you a story in somebody else's mythology, right? I'm going to retell you the story of this Greek tale. I'm going to retell you, this is not to cast aspersions, but like the Rick Riordan retellings of Greek or Norse or Egyptian myth, right? Rick Riordan does not for a minute think that at the judgment seat his heart is going to be weighed against the feather of Ma'at in the presence of Amaut the monster and the judge Osiris. That is not a meaningful mythology to him. He's just picked someone else's symbols and he's playing with them to entertain you, right? Neil Gaiman, the same, does not believe that Mr. Wednesday is Odin who has come to North America with Scandinavian immigrants. They're playing, they're slumming it. They're tourists in somebody else's mythology. Wolfe is writing in his own mythology. This is brave. This is, I think, the highest kind of storytelling art, right? And it's also kind of dangerous. And I absolutely love it. And again, now we've just had the best kind of twist. Not, oh, surprise, the plot's going somewhere I didn't expect, but hey, wait a minute, maybe the story I thought I was reading is not the story I'm reading after all. It's something else entirely. Okay? By the way, that's going to happen again before this volume ends. This sequence ends up with this sentence that talks about them Severian and Jonas, I think the others. It says they're happy and naked and clean. And the imagery is a little surprising because we don't see them like stripped down and bathe or anything. But I think this is Edenic imagery. This is Eden imagery. Right? There's been something like their experience of this. Remember that what's just happened is they've just taken the Eucharist. Their experience of this is something like a reversal of the fall. They're happy and naked and clean, like even Adam in the garden before eating of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, right? Or like children when they are first born, happy and naked and clean. All right. They accept an errand from Vodalus, which is to go to House Absolute. Somebody is going to say to them a password. They will then give him this little metal object that Vodalus not them, Severian. Severian will hear this password. It's a phrase, and he will then hand over this metal object, and he says, if there is a return message, if that person gives you a message, you in turn deliver it to someone who gives you this other password. So they have to go to the House Absolute. The House Absolute, we've been hearing about this in as early as the beginning of book 1. This is the palace of the Otarch. The implication of the description of the House Absolute in the beginning of book 1 seemed to be that it is invisible. Now we find out that it is underground. That is the nature of its invisibility. And it seems to be, by the way, it's buried under a park. And there are these implications that it was something like a hotel, maybe. It has these weird kind of hotel vibes, okay? Maybe I'll talk about that when we get there. So he's captured. The two of them are captured, and they're thrown into a room with about something like 40 prisoners. These people they haven't been arrested. They were born prisoners. 7 or 8 generations of people have been imprisoned in this big room. And the ceiling is artificially low. And when they poke up the ceiling tiles and look underneath, they realize that there's a higher and very ornate ceiling. And they realize that this big chamber they're in was actually once a suite. It was a series of rooms, right? and it's been turned into this giant prison chamber where people are fed twice a day. What they are fed, again, this kind of hotel vibes, is a coffee service and pastries. People with a cart push out coffee service and pastries, and you can see the hall on the other side, but there's armed guards. You can't get out, and you're fed twice a day. The first prisoner who was arrested seems to have a Korean name, Kim Lee Sung. Except that those are all pushed together, Kim Lee Sung, and said as one word. In the dark, people appear and shoot Severian with blue fire. We learn later these are this torture is something that the noble youth of the Autarch's community, noble youth of House Absolute, engage in for fun, torturing these prisoners. Severian, though, has the claw of the conciliator, and it heals him. Prisoners refer to that as whipping, as being whipped, the young coming in and attacking them. We learn more about Jonas in a couple of ways. So Jonas at this point talks about arriving on Earth in a crash. He was on a vessel that crashed, and he says that that he was injured in the crash, and so his body had to be supplemented with parts that were not its own. Right now, this is excellent, because at first what we think is Jonas is human and he was given robotic parts. But a couple chapters later, he says it again, and we realize, oh no, Jonas was a robot, and when the flying saucer, whatever, crashed, they killed a human, but also Jonas was damaged. His head was destroyed, right? His face was destroyed, and one of his arms, and they took them off the dead human and reattached them, right? So Jonas is a robot with human parts, not the other way around. And this is interesting because we get at this point, Severian took with him the Book of the Wonders of Earth, right? The so-called brown book that he brought to Thecla to read in her cell. And he's passes the night here reading a story out of it. And the story is a retelling of the story of Theseus, right? Theseus leaves Athens. He goes and King Minos on Crete wants to basically sacrifice him to the Minotaur in the maze. Well, he's supposed to be a sacrifice, right? Athens sends 7 youth every 7 years or whatever it is as a sacrifice. He goes as a sacrifice. But Ariadne, the daughter of the king, falls in love, helps Theseus, gives him the secret of the labyrinth. He uses a thread to find his way out, kills the Minotaur, right? But in that story, and this is not what Severian's reading. In the Greek story, when Theseus sails back, he is to have a black sail, or the ship is to have a black sail if Theseus is dead and a white sail if Theseus is alive, and they forget to put up the white sail. And so the Theseus sees his father, sees the ship coming with a black sail and kills himself, right? That's a very fast summary of the story of Theseus. So Severian reads a version of that, which connects with this idea of the sort of weird Abaya and his brides, the Undines, as weird kind of Lovecraftian sea giants that are in the waters of Earth, right? So it's a story about a city of magicians and a magician who artificially creates a sun. That sun goes out to a maze of islands to battle against this big sea monster. The sea monster's daughter helps him. He wins. He wins by throwing. He has a steamship, and he wins by this device that involves him loading the furnace with tar, and the black smoke helps him defeat the sea monster, but it also darkens the sails. And so, having defeated the sea monster, when he comes back, his father sees the black sails and believes it's a sign of mourning, and his father, the magician, kills himself, thinking his son is dead. Right? It's the story of Theseus. Now, why is that interesting? Well, there's a there's a thing about Theseus that Gene Wolfe doesn't say, which seems highly relevant and doesn't include in his story, and that is the idea of the ship of Theseus, which is a philosophical question raised by the Greek writer Plutarch. And Plutarch, I mean, he talks about the ship of Theseus, but it could be any ship. He says, look, over time, right, a ship has parts replaced. If a board is damaged, you replace the board. If the sail is torn, take the sail off and replace the sail. If the rope's fray, you get rid of the ropes, put new ropes. And at some point, isn't it fair to say it's not the same ship anymore? I mean, if every part is replaced, it's no longer the ship of Theseus. Well, what about if 80% of the parts are replaced? Is it a different ship? What about if 70%? What about 60? What about half? Right? At what point is it no longer the ship of Theseus? Now, why is this relevant? This again, Wolfe doesn't raise Plutarch. You just know, if you know the story of Theseus, you know the question about the ship of Theseus, which is really not about the ship of Theseus at all. It's this philosophical question about identity. You go, okay, well, what about Jonas then? Right? Is the Jonas who crashed, lost most of his face and head and one arm and maybe other parts and had them replaced with a human, is that still the same Jonas? But also, what about Severian, right? Is Severian still Severian now that he's carrying around Thecla inside? And we start to get unsubtly now. Maybe we had it earlier more subtly, so we didn't see it, but now unsubtly we get moments where clearly we're basically in Thecla's head as Severian is narrating the story. Is it Severian? To what extent is it something else? Now, by the way, one of these unsubtle memories from Severian, remember Thecla was a concubine of the Otarch. She's been here before. He remembers a way out. So he and Jonas sneak out. They creep around and they find what they had described to them in stories before back in the botanical gardens, but now they see it. And it's basically like a Star Trek transporter. It's a teleportation device. It's never called that. And Jonas has been damaged by the blue fire and promises to return, not for Severian, he promises to return for Jolenta, with whom he has some kind of affection. Maybe he's fallen in love. And this is where Severian realizes that actually the original Jonas is the robot, not the flesh and blood parts of the man. And Jonas disappears for now out of the story, teleports away. We don't see him for the rest of the book. Severian's had his sword taken from him, but searching around inside, sort of sneaking around the hallways, pretending he belongs to people he sees or hiding, he manages to find the sword. He meets here Rudescend, the curator, which is to say the curator of the library back in the Citadel of Nessus, right? So this is a guy he's met before, and there's this curious question. Well, in a space, in a setting, in a world where you can teleport instantaneously across space and even travel through time, in some sense, is the library in the Citadel of Nessus actually connected to the House Absolute? Is House Absolute in some sense also inside the city of Nessus? We don't know, but we see the curator. They have a conversation. We know it's him. He remembers Severian, and the curator says Votilus's password to him, and so Severian delivers the object, but the curator does not give him any message in return. Looking for a way to escape, I think the curator mentions that the theatrical company, Dr. Talos and Baldanders, are here, and then helps him find his way to them. They are out on the lawn. They've got the stage set up. I don't remember if I said this last time, but when everything is packed into a wagon, Baldanders pulls it, right? And there was a little line in book one where Baldanders said he was older than Dr. Talos. Interesting, because it'll come up. They're preparing to perform a play for House Absolute. And they're perfect. We were going to have to give your lines to somebody else. Here you are, Severian. Come perform in the play. There's Dorcas. There's Jolenta. And Jolenta leads Severian away. And we have a terrible scene. And I mean by terrible, it sort of runs us right up against this question of like, what is actually happening in this story? How do I feel about it? How do I come to grips with it? So Jolenta complains. She wanted Dr. Talos to make her sexually irresistible to men, and he did. Okay. We don't know everything he did, but some combination of cosmetic surgery. Later on, at the end of this book, Severian can briefly sort of see inside people, and there seems to be like wire used inside her and reconstructing her, and it's made her into this exaggerated bombshell. She's very top heavy. She has voluptuous thighs, and she's it's what she wanted, but she's finding it difficult because men can't resist her, and she has to fight them off, or really Baldanders or Dr. Talos have to fight them off. She leads Severian away, and they're on the grounds of the garden of the House Absolute. And Severian finds her irresistible, and she falls asleep. And he, so this is the question, right? Arguably, then he rapes her, right? And one read of this is to say Severian is a bad person. There were no guarantees. You know, he saved the dog. He did good things, but like in chapter 1, he decides to side with a rebel for no apparent reason, and kills a guard with an axe to help him. Right? Like he's done bad things before. Maybe this is another bad thing Severian does. On the other hand, Jolenta's whole tragedy, and she's sort of the arc that we see completed in this book, is that she got what she wanted, and it destroyed her, right? Because she desired to be sexually irresistible, to get fame and wealth, and she became sexually irresistible, and but the result was that it made her life worse, right? Also, it's not clear. Jolenta leads him away. It's not clear that Jolenta doesn't want this, right? So maybe in some sense she is consenting. Also, remember the unreliability of the narrator. We don't know that any of this even actually happens, right? Or is Severian telling us this, or is Thecla as Severian for some reason telling us this? But it's an example of, man, you have to kind of think about this book and decide what you feel about it, and you kind of have to say, well, you know, this is probably what happened, or maybe this happened. Or maybe I don't know what happened. But they go back, they do the play. During the play, Baldanders, there's a scene where he's supposed to act berserk. He really gets into the part. The crowd freaks out. Severian realizes there are cacogens, i.e. aliens, non-humans, extraterrestrials in the crowd, and they shoot at Baldanders. They don't kill him, but they light him on fire. So there's this berserk giant racing around, thrashing around in the crowd. Severian and grabs Dorcas, and they run out. The rest of the company apparently runs out separately, and they all get out of the House Absolute. And then apparently by chance they meet up on the road. They run away on the same road, so they meet up again an hour later. There's a sort of there's a parting of the ways that's fairly disturbing. Baldanders and Dr. Talos want to go to Lake Diuturna, there's this suggestion that maybe that's Lake Titicaca, because again, we seem to be in South America. Severian still wants to find the Pellerines, and wants to give them back the claw of the Conciliator, right? He's this, like, man, he's done terrible stuff. On the other hand, he's not all bad, right? So he wants to find the Pelorines, and he believes that's a different road. He has to go across the pampas. So they're going to part ways. Dorcas and Severian, Baldanders and Talos are going the other way. And then Dr. Talos says, Jolenta, you can't come with us. And she says, well, I want to. And he says, no. And he beats her. And so Severian and Dorcas take her along. But she is basically destroyed. The exhaustion, the trauma, the again having got what she wanted and discovered it was actually terrible. And sort of the way she's physically constructed, she can't really. She's not made for walking. So Dorcas and Severian are helping her along. They camp beside a river, and there's an encounter that night. Jolenta and Dorcas are asleep, and there's an Undine, one of these giant women in the water, who summons Severian out to talk to her. And she says interesting things. One of the things she says is that Baldanders is continuing. She knows Baldanders, the giant. He is continuing to grow. She says one day, like us, he will have to come into the water. The reason why Abaya and his concubines are in the water is because we're too big. If we were upon the land, we'd be crushed. So we become sea giants. And Severian's perception of her is that she looks like a woman, right? One day, Baldanders will have to join us. She also talks about swimming between, we swim between the stars. So we earlier heard this story about seeds being thrown into the ocean that seemed that the seeds sprouted into these things. But then there's this suggestion that they came here deliberately from another planet. So when that encounter finishes, Jolenta has cuts on her wrists. Severian and Dorcas speculate that she's been attacked by something. They talk about blood-drinking bats. Again, we're in South America. But Jolenta is clearly going downhill. They hit the pampas. The claw will not heal Jolenta, but it does allow Severian. They have the herds of wild cattle, and Severian uses the claw to subdue, to dominate, to domesticate a bull. And they mount Jolenta. He mounts both women on the back of the bull, and travels north across the pampa is a grassland, a tall grassed plain. They run into this farmer who has an injured son, and they live in a little hut, and they heal the son, but then the son recognizes Severian somehow and says he is the lictor of Thrax. Now, lictor means I think it's a Roman word. And it's an official who administers punishments. Okay, I don't think we've seen the word until now at this point, but he's the lictor. And remember that this is the assignment when Father Palamon threw, or was it Gerlos? His father, I forget which one, sent him out with the sword Terminus Est. It was to go to Thrax and become their torturer. Right. Well, he haven't got to Thrax yet, but he says that's the lictor of Thrax. Kill Severian. Severian has to defend himself. He breaks the father's arm. Then he uses the Claw of the Conciliator to heal it. Which, by the way, the act of healing the father's arm also makes it's a grass hut. The roof is dead sod. It makes all the grass turn green and sprout again. They run into there's sort of a one final encounter. They come to this. It's called the Stone Town, but it's a ruin. In fact, they're warned by the farmer that whichever road you follow, the Stone Town, I think he says that it'll bend the road to put itself across your path. You inevitably will come to the Stone Town. So they do. It's a ruin, and Severian sees people on silhouettes, figures on top of a building. They go up there and they encounter. They encounter a witch. She and her apprentice, call her the Cumaean. This is a classical reference. The Cumaean, Cumae, was a Greek town that had a sibyl, a prophetess to the god Apollo. So the Cumaean is this Cirrus, right? That's the reference. And the witch shares wine for some wine for Jolenta. A man arrives from his name is Hildegren. He's Vodalus's man, shows up unexpectedly, and he gives the password. He gives the second password, i.e., give me information. Oh, I missed something important. Hold on, I'll rewind in a second. He gives him the password that says, hey, give me the information you heard in House Absolute. And only Severian wasn't given any. But it turns out Dorcas was. She said, someone came up and told me this, and she passes on the information. Now, I missed one thing in House Absolute, but that's super important. So let me just check my notes and make sure I am getting this right. Okay, so I missed a thing in House Absolute. I got to rewind and mention. I missed one encounter. In fact, I didn't talk about one of the encounters back in book 1, so I'm gonna have to sort of rewind the thread back to there. Back in book 1, after the torturers assign Severian to be part of keeping an eye, to sit and keep Thecla company, and also you're gonna have to participate in their torture, they're worried that Severian will be seduced. And they want to sort of get that out of his system. So they send him to a brothel. They give him a little bit of money. They send him to a particular brothel. This is a brothel in Nessus where all of the prostitutes are made up to look like different famous concubines of the Otarch, right? So people who want to imagine themselves as the Otarch or whatever. And of course, Thecla was one of those concubines. So he goes and has an experience with, and this is like a year and a half, 2 years in the past, right? Has an experience with this woman who is made up to look like Thecla, although as he gets closer and sees under the lights, he knows it's obviously not her, right? But he also meets and talks to the guy who keeps the bordello. When he is in the House Absolute, the Palace of the Otarch, after he meets Rudescent, the curator, it isn't Rudescent who sends him to where the theater is. This is a mistake I made. I think he says he doesn't know, but then Severian runs into the bordello keeper again, okay? And the bordello keeper does know, and by the way, reveals his identity and says, and as the Otarch, he's the Otarch. And that's why he's here. And so there's this right, this is where the second point where the story gets kind of mind-blowing, where you're like, what am I, what is the story that I am seeing after all, right? Is the Otarch in league with Vodalus, right? Have I been being manipulated? Have I, Severian, been being manipulated by the Otarch all along? So okay, so we're in the stone tower on top of this ruin, and the Hildegren shows up, and Dorcas was given a message, apparently by the Otarch, okay, by this same person, and she gives it now to Hildegren. Now, what Hildegren wants, we're at like the final sequence of the book, is it says he wants to raise Apu Punchau, and he refers to Apu Punchau as the head of days, which is a very interesting, provocative phrase, right? Because, and we're going to see more of Apu Punchau later in the series, but of course it sounds a lot like the Ancient of Days, who in the book of Daniel chapter 7 seems to be God, and God specifically in the moment of being, or in the act of being, sitting on his throne, right? So he wants to raise Apu Punchau. He needs the Cumaean to do this. The Cumaean casts her spell, does her magic, and everybody passes out. Now, when Severian wakes up, everybody is translucent. He can see through them. This is why he sees, apparently, he can sort of see the surgical work and the reconstructive work that's been done on Jolenta. He also sees that the Cumaean is not human, that there's something like a lizard inside what looks to him like a woman. He sees the building of the stone town, and the implication is that this is extremely old. It's not just in Severian's past. We are somewhere in South America that it's in our past. This is an Inca or a pre-Inca or proto-Inca or some ancient South American town. Abu Punchau is there's like a shaman there, but Abu Punchau is like the king. There is the line that says it's somebody that Severian knew when he was young. So it doesn't say Severian. It says first person. It says I recognize them from my youth, right? And now, of course, we're in this position of being uncertain whether this is therefore somebody from Severian's youth. Who would that be? Master Malrubius, who was the master of the order before Gerlos and Palamon, right? Is Abu Punchau the same person as Master Malrubius? Or is it somebody from Thekla's youth? We don't know. But it's somebody that one of them recognizes. Hildegren fights Abu Punchau, calls to Severian for help. Severian jumps in, he gets knocked down. Then he sees only Hildegren fighting himself, and passes out. He comes back. It is raining. We're back apparently in his present time. The witches are gone. Hildegren is gone. Dorcas is there, and Jolenta is dead. And that's book 2 of the Book of the New Sun. Now, in terms of like the overall story, man, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and more uncertainties around point of view and what do I believe, and when does this story take place? It seems to take place now in the ancient past. We have characters from the distant future showing up to deliver messages of hope, right? Or to disappear. We have characters who are from off the planet. The only sort of discrete, completed tale we seem to get in this story is the story of Jolenta, and it's a little parable, and it's sad, and it's about I mean, I hate to sort of commit to an interpretation of Gene Wolfe, but it's this little parable about, hey, yes, sexual attractiveness is a mighty power, but it fades. And there's a kind of tragedy into leaning into it, because not only is it inevitably going to flower and then go away, but in fact, it will cause you as many problems as it will solve, right? Jolenta, yes, becomes irresistible to men. Yes, she becomes the star of the stage. She also puts herself in a position of being victimized again and again. And then she is very quickly, at the end, when Severian looks at her last, she looks exactly like he first met her in the coffee shop. All of the artifice of Dr. Talos is faded. In the end, the beauty has taken from her more than it ever gave her. All right, so that is book 2, The Claw of the Conciliator. Book 3 is called Sword of the Lictor, and we've learned the word lictor. Lictor is an official who administers punishments. So I look forward to seeing you next time. We will talk about the Sword of the Lictor.